Welcome to the podcast. Adam Winter's here with me. I'm Joe Gould, and today we're going to be talking about Godzilla Minus One,
The best
which is
Godzilla.
it is a very good movie, especially compared to the two previous ones that we reviewed from the Millennium series. It is nice to have a movie with themes in it and with good CGI.
Probably made for about the same amount of money as what they spent adjusted for inflation on Godzilla 2000 and Megaguirus.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just some general numbers about the movie. It's just finished up its run, at least in America. I'm not 100% sure if it's running in any other countries, but for a budget of 10 to 15 million, it is going to have an overall box office of right around 105 million, with 56 million of that coming here in the United States.
Should have been more, in
So,
my opinion.
with this movie, it in terms of just a few more things, in Japan, it released in 500 theaters. Toho International brought it to 2,300 North American screens. Very wide release, even here in Mount Juliet, which is a suburb outside Nashville. We only have about 30,000 people in our town, but we did get this movie. And it is commemorating the 70th anniversary of Godzilla. So in terms of the title itself, Minus One, is a little bit odd. I don't think it translates very well to the American audience. But I did find a quote. I assume this is from the promotional material, but I don't see a citation. But here's the quote. "The worst despair in the series' history strikes Japan. After the war, Japan had been reduced to zero. Godzilla appears and plunges the country into a negative state. The most desperate situation in the history of Japan. Who and how will Japan stand up to it?" So I think what they're striking at is, they've been reduced to a situation which is worse than zero. Which again,
That
I don't
makes
think.
sense.
I think Godzilla Minus One sounds cool, but I would never figure it out that that's what they were meaning. So a couple of things about the movie in general. Two of the major themes, I think you would say, is survivor's remorse, but also just a critique of Japanese culture during the wartime back then, in terms of a fight to the death mentality.
Yeah, that's
And
fair.
I would not. I wish I looked up the second part about the Japan military strategy today, and I wish I had really read this beforehand. I think I would have caught more of the themes or appreciated it more when I was watching it on the film. Are you familiar with that stuff at all?
Are we talking about the cult of honor, the kamikaze mentality?
Yeah. Well, from when I was looking at it, a lot of it seemed to be over the emperor worship and then the Bushido code,
Yes,
which is really
I'm
the
not a
same thing.
scholar on those, but right. So the emperor claiming divinity was part of that whole era, and so
Yeah.
you have the soldiers reflecting that as this movie opens. I think the title says in the waning days of World War II. It doesn't tell you the specific months, but I assume it would be August of 1945, and Japan surrenders September 2nd of 45.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And I don't know if they're trying to get too specific for the plot or not. But yeah, I mean, it would have to be the very final time. Like the kamikaze pilots are no longer going out. Pretty much, like this is like he would have been one of the last.
Yeah. And he realizes what's the point.
Yeah. Well, that and he was scared. But yeah,
I don't blame him.
so I found a real brief summary of the emperor worship stuff. So it looks like well, and also about just the fighting to the death spirit. So apparently they had been trained, their military, that Japanese soldiers, that if they received surrender orders, that was a work of American propaganda. And I didn't realize this, but actually some of the Japanese soldiers held out for years after the war was over because because that mentality they'd been told do not surrender.
Kong Skull Island, right? You saw that one? The opening scene?
So in the Japanese religion of Shintoism, the Japanese emperor was a direct descendant of the sun goddess Amaterasu. And this made Emperor Hirohito a demigod who Japanese soldiers gave their lives to. They also mentioned that the Japanese religion of Shintoism elevated dying for the emperor of Japan to a state of grace. So, like the most what's the word I'm looking for? The most celebrated death would have been dying in the military for your emperor.
It's a jihad.
Yeah. And apparently, the Bushido Code uh, dominated the Imperial Japanese Army and their Navy's way of thinking. And it stressed martial spirit, self sacrifice, loyalty, justice, a sense of shame if dishonored, and an honor being more important than life itself. So,
And that's what Shikishama has to come to terms with throughout this movie, our protagonist of this film.
yes, and it was also part of the law. So, the 1908 Imperial Japanese Army's Criminal Code had this provision, quote, a commander who allows his unit to surrender without fighting to the last man or concedes a strategic area to the enemy shall be punishable by death. Basically, you don't give up the battle no matter what's going on. You could be, if you're outnumbered 2 to 2,000, you keep going until they're all gone.
But after the surrender of Japan, United States takes over the Japanese territories, and I believe Korea was under Russian or Soviet control. And MacArthur, who gets a cameo in this movie, I think the first time ever Douglas MacArthur is mentioned in a Godzilla film. He is a little bit ahead of ourselves, but there is a what's the word I'm looking for? There's a collage of military documents that flash by on the screen in very quick succession, and there's a it's an American, it's in English, right? There's an English voiceover, and
Yes.
it almost sounds like AI because it's so emotionless. It's just blunt to the fact, like it's over a radio signal, and it's going through all the American military tests, and it talks about the Soviet tensions, and it's supposed to be telling you about the origin of how Godzillasaurus becomes Godzilla. And
yeah, I found it very
ahead,
interesting. Yeah, I found it very interesting when they did the back and forth, like almost like the news articles or the news updates, but they used English for that portion of the film. I just found that interesting, knowing that this was straight up Japanese movie.
And at some point, I don't remember when, but under MacArthur's oversight in the U.S. occupation of Japan, the next reigning emperor has to renounce divinity, and I think even put out a written statement. So they didn't delve into that in this film, but women got the right to vote under U.S. occupation. That probably factors into some of the plot background of this movie with Noriko later on. But again, I'm getting way ahead of ourselves. But you brought up the historical topic, so there you go.
Yeah, no, I just found it really interesting, and I was thinking about this earlier today. This is a Japanese movie with a lot of critiquing about Japanese government. 50, 60, 70, I guess 70 years ago now, 80 years ago.
But Godzilla. Yeah.
But I will say, I think I really enjoyed the serious Godzilla movies. Like, I enjoy the funny ones too, like with the fighting, but the pro wrestling style. I think my least favorite is when you don't get the pro wrestling with the monsters, and there's nothing serious going on in the whole film.
Too many of those during the late 60s, I think, early 70s. Godzilla's Revenge, right? You're thinking of Godzilla's Revenge.
No, actually, I was really thinking of the last two movies we watched. But
what Godzilla did? It looked like he jumped off
less than the second one.
Megaguirus.
Well, less the second one, but like Godzilla 2000. I think that's why, to me, it was just a real disappointing movie.
Yeah, he was fighting a spaceship for felt like half the movie.
Yeah, and there was no theme. Like, no, you know what I'm saying?
Hey, don't diss that Y2K paranoia commentary. Don't you disrespect that now.
All right. So Godzilla Minus One. By the way, before we do, one more thing about the Godzilla. I hope they release the minus one minus color version when they do the home release, because I want to go and compare certain scenes. I really hope they are. I think I'd be shocked if they're not, but I hope they do. Okay, so picking up. So again, the final days of World War II, in 1945. You want to pronounce his name?
I always say Shikishama. Let me look at that spelling one more time.
They
Shikishima,
call him
excuse me.
they call him
Shikishima.
Kochi though.
Oh,
Yeah.
I never say the first.
Well, in the film though, they tended to. Anyways, there's a pilot. He's a kamikaze pilot, and he he flies his plane to a repair base. Um, I think it's Tachibana or Tachibana. Excuse me.
Oh, yeah, that's the
Uh,
commanding officer there, right? Tachibana.
yeah, the head mechanic, I guess. I'm not
Right.
sure. I'm not sure how that
He is a
works,
commanding
but
officer because he counts, even though he's a mechanic.
yeah. So he lands his plane there. He's a kamikaze pilot. Says there's something wrong with the plane. They check it. Don't find anything wrong with it. Uh, he's defensive when they say that, but nothing really comes up. I don't think they are too condemning of him in that moment. And then that kind of sets us up where he's on this island. So, and I'm sorry, he landed on Odo Island, which we don't know too much about. It's really only in this scene. And I'm assuming it's a real island, but they could have made it up.
I think it's in the original film, Godzilla.
Okay.
Do you remember? I know we haven't watched in a while. Do you remember the part where Godzilla first appears in the movie, and it's on an island, and they can see his footprints?
You talking about
The
the original?
original Godzilla, 1956, or I forget my year now, but yeah, there's an Odo
Yeah.
Island in that.
Okay. Yeah. I do know the scene you're talking about. So anyways, back to this film. They kind of set that up where we kind of recognize, he's a he is telling them something wrong with his plane, but obviously he's scared and wanting to avoid being in the war. That night, a dinosaur-like creature attacks their campsite, so to speak, and we find out that the islanders call it Godzilla. He's not that tall. How tall would you say? 20, 30 feet?
He looks like the T Rex from Jurassic Park.
Yes. So basic
However,
dinosaur.
I think they
Go
said
ahead.
that thing was supposed to be 25 feet in that movie, so he's probably a little bit bigger than that.
Yeah, he's about what 2 to 3 times the height of the plane when it's just sitting on the ground.
And Godzilla's posture is much different when he's in this early state than he will be later. He has what do you call it? The way the animals have the feet, like the dog, the bend in the bone or whatever, quadrupedal, quadruped. I forget what that. I don't know. He's got that
He
kind
moved a
of
little
thing
bit
going
like the
on.
1998 Zilla.
Yeah, and
He was quicker, kind of ran around a little bit.
it's very much. It's hard to talk about all the Godzilla films before Jurassic Park came out in 1993 and all the Godzilla films after, because the idea of what a dinosaur looks like to a popular audience is largely defined by that portrayal of Jurassic Park. And we get a few scenes in this movie that harken back to that.
And if I'm not mistaken, this is the only nighttime scene with Godzilla in this film.
It's really dark and black and white, too.
Yes. So because he's a fighter jet, they want him to use his plane's gun against Godzilla, and in all likelihood, based on what we're seeing, it would have taken him out. But
I
he
don't know.
freezes up in the cockpit as the monster stands in front of him. Well, he have to get him in the right place, and I'm not convinced that he may have been too close. But I think in terms of the gun itself, probably would have done the job. Based off, I mean, even jumping ahead later on after he's mutated, they're able to do catastrophic damage. The problem is he regenerates. He wouldn't have had that going for him here.
That's fair. It's unlikely. It's not necessarily established, but it is unlikely he would have the healing factor unless he's like Wolverine, right? So the reason he was able to get the extra powers was because he already had the healing factor, which was able to bring him back without killing him and make him into an even worse problem.
True. But anyways, he fails to act. The other than himself and Tachibana, everyone else is brutally killed by Godzilla.
Oh yeah.
He's knocked out. He comes 2 in the morning, and Tachibana is lining up all the dead bodies. and he basically blames him for failing to act. And then later, when they're on their way home with the other wounded soldiers, he hands him the photos that he found of all the dead men with their families.
I'm wondering why he didn't
So
take those back. I guess he was just trying to shame Shikishima instead of actually deliver the photos to surviving relatives.
that's what I believe. I think he wanted him to feel the weight of his failure. I think so.
What a jerk.
Well, it was all his friends that got killed.
Should have
So
delivered those photos to the family members. That's what he should have
I
done.
mean, if you put him in his perspective, he's just there with this. I mean, he's there with his people. He got this kamikaze pilot who doesn't kamikaze, and then proceeds to not kamikaze again, and then everyone dies. So
Ah, well.
yep. So Shikishima returns to Tokyo. There his neighborhood. I think it's in Tokyo. Finds it
Yep,
in
in
ruins.
December.
Yes. Basically, the entire little community has been destroyed. He finds his neighbor Sumiko Oda or Ada. I'm not sure.
I call her
And then
Sumiko. I didn't worry about the other. I guess I
yeah.
go by
So
the first name on that one.
yeah. So Sumiko is happy to see him at first, shocked that he's alive, remembers what his assignment was, and then berates him for cowardice. I think in a lot of ways, this go back to what we were talking about the fight to the death mentality, where
Yeah,
if
she
he had
buys
done
into
his
the old
job,
ways.
well, if there's there's something to this in the sense of like if in the general principle, if you had done your job, this destruction home might not have happened in her perspective. So you can see where she's coming from.
And
Let's
then
see
he's
here.
out in the marketplace, and a lady immediately walks up to him and throws a kid in his arms and runs away after she's being chased by some guys, probably for stealing something. He does not
Ultimate,
leave the child. He takes a seat in the marketplace, hoping the lady will come back. But he never. He
yes.
thinks about abandoning the child once, and he can't do it. Has to go back for her.
So ultimately, Noriko and the baby's what's the child's name again?
Akiko.
Akiko. There we go. Ultimately, they end up living with him. The baby is not her child. She basically
He.
the baby's family had been killed, so she took it.
I forget when he figures that out. I forget how long they've been in there together. Is it just the first night or?
Yeah, it was the
Yeah.
first night. And that's
Yeah.
why he allowed her to stay initially, I think, in the first place. And then the next morning, Sumiko is sneering at them, not really knowing what's going on. But then when she finds out that the baby's not theirs, she gives it some rice to basically nourish the kid.
And yeah, she does give him her prize white rice and says it's not for you, but use it for the child there.
Yeah. And then in March of 1946, Shikishima returns, or it's not returns. He gets a job, a very well-paying, dangerous job of basically detonating all the unexploded mines that all the sides had laid in the bay that were now floating around that were going to blow up ships.
But don't worry, he's got a special boat that he gets to
What
ride
kind of
in.
special boat? What kind of special boat, Adam?
Well, obviously, it's made of the safest material out there. It's wood. It's not too big because the mines were magnetic, the special American mines. And then we're introduced to our rascally bunch of crewmen on the ship. And I only remember the name of one of them, unfortunately. But Professor Noda is the naval weapons engineer who has a lot of knowledge on these things. And then the ship has a captain who I always just call Captain. And there's a younger shipmate who they just call the Kid. And I kept thinking they were related, but when I pulled up the cast list, their names weren't the same. So maybe they weren't related. Maybe I missed that point.
No, they weren't. He was. I don't know. I think he just got hired on with the other ones. But yeah, so the young guy was a kid who had wished he'd been old enough to be in the war, and it's a common theme throughout where they kind of rebuke him for the idea that you want to be in a war. And then the
Yeah,
captain,
he makes the comment, "I wish the war had lasted longer," and that really sets Shikishima off.
Yeah. And then the captain kind of reminded me of whatever a Japanese Sam Elliott would be.
A
Like that
lot of
was kind of
people
his
have
like over the top personality.
all right. A lot of people have drawn comparisons to the crew of the original Jaws film, not the sequels, but and
Yeah,
I
well,
forget who played the
maybe.
captain, the actor who specifically did that one.
So, anyways, they show him how it works. Basically, their ship's made of wood, so it doesn't set off the mines. Um, and they get rid of the mines that way. That's not really important. So he gets home that night. He has a nightmare, reminding himself about Odo Island.
Oh, wait. We got to at least point out that he's really good with the machine gun, even though he never actually got in a dogfight on the boat.
That is true. That is true. So yeah, they
Gatling
use the
gun.
machine gun to set off the mines once they drag them to the surface, and
You know what? I felt good
that's
watching
kind of
him
the
blow
film's.
that mine up. I really
Yeah,
did.
well, I think it's the film. I think it's the film's way of getting the other crew members to like respect him. I think they wanted to get to that point pretty quick, and then I think that was just the avenue they did to do it. So he goes home that night, has a nightmare about Odo Island and Godzilla. Oshi comforts him, and he's questioning whether or not he's even alive, whether he had died on the island, and is just living out a real dream, and gets
Yeah.
pretty freaked out.
At what point does he drive up in his motorcycle that he buys with his mine money?
Mm, I think
Because they do
shortly
a
after
little
that,
time skip.
might even be the next scene.
Yeah, I think it's during the summer of '46 they do that clip show of the military documents with the English voiceover, and it
Yeah,
suggests Godzilla is now being mutated.
yeah. So some American testing apparently mutates Godzilla, and see my notes. Yeah, so I have a note here about a motorcycle. So he at this point he's made enough money with the mines that he's able to fix a lot of his house. He's bought the motorcycle. In the other scenes, you can see the whole town, slowly kind of rebuilding.
+1.
Yeah, yes. He has his crew members come over for dinner one night. They think that initially they think it's his wife and his kid, and he corrects them, and then they encourage him to embrace what he has, and he angrily refuses. And we're not really they haven't fully fleshed out the why, but it comes back to this theme that we're going to see later on that for him, his war isn't over yet. You would see it hear that multiple times.
Very Rambo. So I got to point out, as many child actors as we've had in Godzilla films, the little child who plays Akiko is very convincing when she cries on command. It's like, oh, what'd you
Yes,
do
it's
to that
almost like
kid?
it's almost like they have a recording going in the background.
But the facial expressions, though, no, she really gets into it. Yeah, it's very. It must be hard to do to get a kid to make any kind of the appropriate any gesture on command, but kid's got a
So
future, maybe.
how old was the kid? Since you looked
No
it up.
clue.
Moving on, Ochi gets a desk job in the Ginza district, so she's excited to get back to work. Shikishima is not excited about her going back to work. You can
This
tell.
is in
They're
47, right? This is when they shift to
yes,
that.
yeah, I think in March, and
Yeah,
then
so he's been a year working on the mine.
yeah, and spending time with her, and you can
Right.
tell that they don't ever really hint whether or not there's any kind of a romantic tension there, and but you assume they're at least getting what's the word.
Well, if this was an American movie, there would have been a sex scene in there. But hey, great, fantastic. We can understand the relationship without having to feel like we're at the Peep Show.
Yeah. You're way with words. So, anyways, she gets a job going there. He has to process that information. He's not real excited about it, but he can't argue with it. I think at this point, Godzilla destroys multiple ships. They don't actually see him; they just see the wreckage. And they send
Oh
out the
yeah.
two boats doing the mine sweeping. They send them out to uh, basically figure out what's going on. And as we find out, to slow down whatever's doing the destruction long enough for the real boat. The real what's it? I
It's
got
the
it somewhere.
Takao. It's an
Yeah,
actual historical Japanese warship that had a notable career built in 1939, I think. I thought they just made this for the movie, but no, they're supposed to distract whatever this thing is long enough for the Takao to come intercept and destroy.
yes, and Noda seems to have more information than he shares until they get out there. Kind of a shady move if you actually think about it.
He worked for the government, though.
Yeah, but at this point, Shikishima tells everyone what happened on Odo Island and how it had been covered up. They figure out he was a kamikaze pilot. They don't seem to hold that against him too much. And then, for the most part, they're like, I'm not sure this is a good idea.
Then the captain makes the line about somebody's got to do it, because if not, Tokyo's going to get trampled. It's a very nice little moment for the captain, right up until the point he actually sees what he's dealing with.
Yes, and I believe his exact quote was,
"Oh shit."
Very fitting in that context.
It was very fitting. So it was a very nice. So he, yeah, he was not going to fight to the end on that one.
So then they blow up the sister boat, right? The Minesweeper. That's how Godzilla arrives.
Yes, I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, that's when the captain decides that fighting may not be a good idea.
Now, how does he destroy that boat? It's not atomic breath, because he's saving that for the warship. But
if I'm not mistaken, he just comes up like underneath it.
Okay.
It's been a little bit of time now, so I'm pretty sure he just comes up and kind of tears it apart. It wasn't a very big boat.
Yeah, I was wondering if he got it in his mouth or if he just used a claw or what. But yeah, anyway, he comes up, and some people have remarked on the internet, some of the memes, they're playing fun at how it looks like at various points Godzilla is standing in deep water. But I suppose he has something we don't usually see in the movies. He has a little paddle feet going on. So he's able to keep himself afloat, and he can get a large percentage of his body above water. So that's one of the powers that probably people don't think about a lot.
Well, we don't know exactly how deep this bay is either. Yeah. At least I don't. I should say that.
No, I don't. But
so if he's 100, 150 feet tall, I mean, it's possible. And they are minesweeping, so I don't know.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that later in the movie when they get him in the bay with the freon gas. And it's how many? 1,500 meters. That's about.
I think it was more than that. That was their goal.
Okay.
But yeah. Okay. So I don't know if that was the floor or not, but it was. I don't know. But yeah. So, anyways, their original plan to stall him or to destroy him when they didn't know what they were dealing with was to use the mines. So they had accrued 2 mines and got them on their ship. So they while they're running, they're trying to use the mines to get away or to.
They tried to use the gun first. They did try the gun.
True. So the first mine doesn't work. They get the idea to put the next mine in his mouth. And it's a really cool scene. Basically chews through the ignition, though. So Shikishima has to use the gun to set it off. He does, explodes, and Godzilla appears to be dead. Blew off, I think, one of his eyes and part of his cheek. And then they see him regenerate in front of their eyes.
That's got to be dispiriting.
And then right before they die, the big boat gets there. And they get excited.
And they say, it gets some good shots on Godzilla, and they played the theme music, and that's really nice.
Yeah. And then what happens, Adam?
Well, Godzilla decides to play around with the ship a little while, and then he goes underwater and decides he's going to do atomic breaths from underneath the ship. That looked like it was a real personal decision right there.
Yes. Ultimately, that ship blowing up probably saved the little wood boat due to all the debris. Because Godzilla just kind of walks off or swims off after that, and they are spared.
They establish in this movie that atomic breath does do some damage to him, that he has to regenerate from that.
Yes, or at least recharge. I'm not sure if it's a little bit ambiguous, But yeah, he tends after he does the charge. If he's not in the fight, or if it settles the fight, he does tend to wander off after he does it. So he wakes up, or Shikishima did receive some damage. Whenever the mine went off, they were pretty close to it. So he wakes up in a hospital. His crewmates are there. Ultimately, when he goes home, he tells Oshi, or what's her name? What are we calling her?
Noriko is the last name, but you want
Yeah.
to at least point out that when he was in the hospital, they noted that the Japanese government was keeping this very much under wraps and not trying to tell the public in any way of what might be out in the waters.
Yes, and this actually is probably the first time they start not just describing the Japanese government, but hinting that they're not always looking out for the people's best, for lack of a better word.
So he goes home.
So he goes home, and he shares with the girl. Finally, says what happened on Odo Island. He's again wondering if he died, and he's dreaming everything. She encourages him that he's still alive, and there was this quote here, and I think it was I don't think it was in the last one, but there was a line that is this the last dream of a dead man? And then she replies, "They are the ghost you created." And there's an irony there, because he did create those ghosts in some ways in his own mind from his lack of action. So in some ways, I don't think it's what they're going for, but it's like, is he being haunted by the ghost of the people that he failed, in this dream? But very, very good scene though.
Noriko has the line, I think she reveals it for the first time then, about how her own parents died in the fires. And they charged her, "You must survive. You must live." And I don't think we get the story of what happened to Akiko's parents, Akiko, but that becomes a factor then for Shikishima to find the motivation to live there. So I don't know if you've ever seen the Japanese animated film from the 80s, Grave of the Fireflies, but I feel like this is a more satisfying resolution to that kind of plot.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen that. But yes, this is really where they're really picking up. They've hinted at before, but just the survivor's guilt that he's feeling. He not only did everyone else, like, why is he still there? He's like, he shouldn't be there. Like, he should not. He feels like he should have died multiple times at this point. But he has this curse of living almost.
But he'll do it for Akiko, and he finds motivation to do so.
Okay, then we have the attack in Ginza.
So, very unfortunate day for Noriko, I gotta say. Poor gal.
Yes. So she's at work, or on her way to work. Godzilla attacks that city. Shikishima hears about it on the radio. Frantically goes down there.
He's very really fortunate timing when he arrives, I gotta say.
Yeah, they're stretching a little bit on that one. But, which, maybe there wasn't too many roads. I mean, there may have only been a couple of main roads, so I'll give him benefit of the doubt. There's a really cool scene where Godzilla is tearing up a train that Akiko is on, or what's her name?
Noriko.
It's like the names until you start talking about them, and then they all blend together.
I keep thinking there's a B in there, but it's Noriko.
Yeah. So she is. So there's a really cool scene there. Nice.
So
effects.
Godzilla grabs, I think, 3 cars, and I think they're hearkening back to the original film. And he's got the middle car in his mouth, and the other 2 are kind of dangling off the side.
No, I love seeing Godzilla with trains in his mouth. It reminds me of my dog when she's got like a toy that has ropes hanging out of her mouth. And she's just running around the house with it. It's like it's playtime.
He's having fun.
He is. She lives off the train thing. She's scared to death at the bottom. Shikishima finds her, tries, gathers her up, so to speak, and they're running with the crowd to try to get away. And then we see Godzilla. He's going to use his atomic breath, and this is where. So there's 2 parts. One is how he does the atomic breath. It's his dorsal fins kind of like shoot out, like one by one, starting from his tail, or it starts from the tail going up, I believe, or is it the way?
Looks around? Like a domino set. Yeah, it's a domino set.
And it's a pretty neat effect. I don't know if it makes sense when you think about it, but it is a cool visual. And then the next thing we find here is that his atomic breath is significantly different in this movie as to what it does. It's basically You do get the heat ray, but it produces basically a nuclear explosion, a la an atomic bomb almost. But anyways, the nuclear explosion flattens the area, and she sacrifices herself by pushing Shikishima into an alley instead of
Oh,
just
I'd like to
diving
make an
into the alley with
observation
him.
here. I'd like to make an
Go ahead.
observation. So
Observe.
when we watched Megaguirus, the commanding officer pushes the protagonist. He notices trouble is befalling him in Godzilla's rampage, and he has enough time to shove his friend to safety, who is safe, and he dies. And here we have Noriko, who regains her composure for enough time to shove Shikishima into an alley where he's completely safe from the blast. But there you go. There's your parallel between the two.
Yeah. I mean, it's my critique of this is kind of like in Titanic. Why did they both get on the door? It's like instead of pushing him into the alley, you want to jump into the alley. Because the dude's like 110 pounds soaking wet. I mean, they're the same size.
At least we didn't have the Gumby trash can bouncing when Godzilla was
walking. That is true. Yeah. That is true. So she is blown far, far away. It starts doing like a black rain created from the mushroom cloud that Godzilla created. And Shikishima is screaming in grief.
That was a nice effect.
Yeah, I think it would have been cool if every time he did his atomic blast, you got that black rain falling.
Shikishima was screaming just like Kiriko was, too, in the Megaguirus movie.
So this probably, unless I'm just missing something obvious, was the most fatalities in one Godzilla scene ever. This says 30,000 people were killed or injured.
You'd have to go back to the original. Yeah, the original.
Even then, they killed a lot of people, but they never set a number like that.
You're probably right about
the first number. The first one, I think it's tied to his blast. His blast was basically a nuclear bomb. I mean, he did his blast, and that blast itself took down the whole city.
And I don't know if a death toll was ever stated in Shin Godzilla when he does a couple of those at different points.
So anyway, they're definitely upping the ante in terms of the dangerousness of Godzilla. Just dropping a line like that, it's pretty significant. All right, so moving on, Noda. Well, they do their little morning scene, MOURNING, and then
it's the wake. They're having a wake for Noriko, even though no body was found, but it's assumed she perished. Is the idea?
Yes. And there's no reason to believe that she would have survived. And quite honestly, she shouldn't have survived.
Definitely not.
Spoiler. So Noda gets there's a group of private citizens trying to come up with a plan to take down Godzilla because the army is hesitant to ask the U.S. for help, and the U.S. is hesitant to ask for help because of Russia. So anyways, they go and they come up with this plan. And it's a kind of a two-part plan. The first part makes a lot more sense than the second part. But would you like to explain the plan, Adam?
Well, Professor Noda says they have to lure him into the trench, which the name is escaping it. But it's in the bay there right outside Tokyo. And the depths of it can go down to 1,500 meters. So their goal is to shove Godzilla far enough down into the trench that the sheer pressure at 1,500 meters will hopefully be too much for him to endure, because not even any known sea life can withstand pressures of that level. They're hoping to attach the Freon tanks to a couple of cables and use a couple of ships to flank him and hope that he stands in the middle long enough for them to tie him up and then launch those Freon tanks. That's plan A.
So what you're saying is they want to give him a Freon bubble bath.
It sounds like it. Yeah. But there's a lot of skepticism in that room.
There is. And they almost all leave. And what's the plan B in case that doesn't work?
Well, there's been a new invention, I suppose, by an upstart Japanese company, Mighty Balloon or something like that, fun with balloons, but they've invented some instantly inflatable rafts that they're also going to attach, I suppose, onto the Freon canisters or something. It's going to be in the same area. So that once they get Godzilla down for 1,500 meters, I don't know how long the Freon was supposed to keep firing, but if they realize there's a chance that Godzilla would no longer be held to the bottom, they're going to try and launch him back up with the inflatable balloons, and they hope that once he gets to the surface, the rapid repressurization will overrun his regeneration factor and destroy him. And now I'm starting to think, I wonder if those little inflatable balloon packages could survive at 1,500-meter depths if Godzilla was doubtful on that. But there you go. That's my understanding of Plan B.
Yeah, I think Plan B was by far my least favorite part of the movie.
It
And
made for a fun moment when they all looked out the windows and saw the balloons.
But my thought was, so they're critiquing this whole kamikaze culture, right? So the smart thing to do would do Plan A. Plan A is great, and if it doesn't work, run away before Godzilla gets back up to the surface. Don't bring him to the surface and then have no Plan C. It's like,
yeah, I had a Plan C in my mind, but I guess they were limited since they did not have actual military involvement. But Plan C would have been you have the actual warships at a distance who then move in and hit him with everything you got after he reemerges with an overworked healing factor.
yeah. Well, as we'll see, they're pretty incompetent in their planning, anyways. But that's skipping ahead.
But Shikishima has a different plan in mind, and all he needs is an airplane.
So he is the Plan C that they don't even know is the Plan C. Is he wants to get an airplane, a fighter jet. They're hesitant to give him one because they think he'll do something stupid. I don't know why they would think that. He obviously has shown no propensity for doing anything stupid. But anyways, that's where it comes out his war isn't over. Or they explicitly say the line, I think. They find him a plane, a really cool plane.
Prototype.
Yes. By the way, I read that plane really did exist as a prototype, but it was an unfinished prototype. So I think they built a 1-to-1 ratio plane for this movie.
That's cool.
If I'm not mistaken, they gave it to one of the museums around there when they were done.
They said in the movie there were a few of them that were built in order to defend the homeland during potential bombings or something like that.
Yeah. So Tokyo, I don't know if he actually... I will say, I don't know if the plane, when it was flying, was CGI or not. I really don't know. But if it did fly, it would have been the only working one of those planes.
And the way Shikishima justifies his use of the plane to his contemporaries is he's going to be the bait that lures Godzilla into the specific spot of the trench bay where they want to launch the trap.
And thank goodness that he does that. So, but one more thing before we get to the fight. He wants to get Tachibana to basically finish fixing the plane as part of his survivor's remorse, so to speak, wanting to right the wrongs. He just feels like he has to be the one to finish fixing the plane. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but you got anything to add?
He sends a bunch of letters and he gets frustrated by the government postal service's inability to find a current address for him.
Yeah, he has to do all the work. So he eventually convinces him to fix the plane. They're going to put, and his plan is, if Plan A and B doesn't work, he wants to build off what he saw when they sent the mine into his mouth and basically load the plane up with explosives and fly it into Godzilla's mouth as a kamikaze pilot. If the other things doesn't work,
it's shocking. I don't think we've had any movie where somebody didn't try that. You know what I'm saying? I've not seen another Godzilla movie where somebody went right into his mouth that I can remember.
No, well, in Mega Guire, she had something similar.
We tried.
She's flying. Right. It's the same effect. She's trying to line up him so the tracker takes them all out. but she is intending to eject herself. He's not. Okay, so then some stuff comes up. The main thing that's relevant for the rest of it is the young guy wants to come with them on the ships. The young guy from the
kid.
minesweepers. Yeah, and they tell
Like
him no. And they basically say if you haven't been in combat, that's a badge of pride. You should be proud of that. More people should be. That should be the goal.
Very Tolkien-esque, I think, with the Hobbit is the idea there.
Yes, but. Yes, and they all go home for the night to spend the evening with their families, in light of the fact that it might be their last night. And then the morning comes out. Shikishima leaves a note with the kid with some money that she takes over to Ota.
Yes, Sumiko, the auntie.
Sumiko, yeah,
auntie,
I'm sorry.
We'll call her.
Yeah. And then he goes and he gets the plane.
But unfortunately, the plan has already gone off the rails because Godzilla has made landfall.
Yes. But before we get to that, Tachibana shows him how to use the device. But he also, and this is not shown on screen, but we all kind of know it's happening, is he shows him basically he's added an ejection device. So he can get out of the plane prior to it. Because while he's showing him stuff, Shikishima realizes that he wants to live. So as you were saying?
Well, Godzilla has made landfall already. They were hoping they'd have a few more hours and that he would be a late riser. Perhaps he'd go eat some breakfast somewhere. Some of those ugly-looking dead fish that he always brings up right before he arrives. They were hoping he would take his time, maybe get a little suntan, but nope. He's on land, and he is trekking across the countryside.
Yeah, I mean, could you talk about bad time management?
They needed the Godzilla prediction network from Godzilla 2000. They needed much better ability to track his whereabouts.
There you go. Shikishima is basically having to be the bait at that point. Almost gets killed a few times. Not quite sure why he was flying, other than dramatic effect, why he was flying that close to Godzilla. I will say, this was my favorite part of the black and white part of when I was watching the black and white version. Was the plane flying. It felt like a reel of old wartime footage. It was really cool.
That's probably the kind of scenes they really did the black and white cut for, too.
Yeah. So eventually he gets them out to the bay, and they're able to go forward with their plan. They got 4 destroyers to work with to do this, but 2 of them were just decoy boats.
Yeah.
So they have him set up, and Godzilla uses his atomic breath on the ships that are empty.
Do you think he had PTSD or something? Is that why he immediately saw the ships and fired the atomic breath?
Well, either he isn't very smart, or he thinks we're not very smart. Probably a little bit of both. But he took them out. I don't even know if the other 2 ships were visible. I'm not sure how far away they were. But this is where they make note again that he has to have time to recharge. I don't know if they actually mentioned that before. That would have been a nice little... If they had made some kind of allusion earlier, it would have been nice, I think. Because they obviously knew it, but I don't think they had told us yet.
Maybe not. I thought it came up in the concerned citizens meeting, but maybe it didn't.
I may have missed it. That's definitely possible. So while he's recharging, the other 2 destroyers circle Godzilla with the cable, get the Freon canisters attached, and then Shikishima is still playing the role of the horsefly, trying to distract him.
The Mega Nula.
Yes. So
and Godzilla gets ready to charge that breath up again, and I forget what his intended target was this time.
He's charged up. I don't think it was the plane. I think it was one of the boats. And then right before he fires it, they let the canisters go off, and it forces him underwater. And he gets down to the 50. It was a good scene. He gets down to the 1,500 meters and freezes in place. The ray seems to fizzle out. I'm not really sure.
It's like your video game console got bricked. It's like, that's it.
So actually, I think that is actually I think there is a plot hole there, which we can come back to in a minute. But he's down there, and they found out that he's still alive. So they move on to Plan B. They inflate the balloons. He starts rising to the surface. They're real excited. But at some point, I think it was around 800 meters, it appears
Exactly,
that he
800
it,
meters.
it appears that he tore through the balloons or something happened to them. We are assuming that he broke them.
He's not swimming to the surface, but he's not being propelled upwards either.
Yes, and then we have what I think we all agree on. Everyone who's watched this movie ever, the stupidest scene in the movie that makes no sense for multiple reasons. Would you like to explain what happened?
Well, Godzilla breaks the crane on one of the warships, and they need to find a way to pull him up the last 800 meters. And so the kid shows up with a whole fleet of little tugboats, and he says, "The useless ones to the rescue," or something like that. And then the tugboats winch themselves to the destroyers and pull the destroyers, and then Godzilla starts rising again, slowly, to the surface.
Now, is that not the stupidest thing you ever heard in your life?
I didn't quite know what they were going for at that point. They're
Like, if
dedicated
he's
to
not
getting him
dead
to,
after the bottom 800, like
and
the whole thing was the decompression, right? So if he's not like if he ain't dead halfway up, it ain't gonna get harder.
that yeah,
Like
I
that's
don't
the
know
easy
how much
part.
more recompression you'd get once you went from 1500 to 800. Not that I'm a scientist in any way, but then you got to get him to 800 to the surface.
Well, he
What's
sat in
that
the
going to do
water.
for you?
Well, he had time at 800 to regenerate whatever damage got happened for the first 700. It's like,
And again, it would make sense if you had a whole bunch of high powered weapons ready to go right when he reaches the surface quickly. But you don't
oh,
have those.
they should have been, hey, tugboats, help us disconnect and get the hell out of here. That's what they should have.
Well,
Anyways,
there you
so
go.
he,
It was a scene for the tugboat people, I guess.
I
Yeah.
guess. But anyways, he gets up. He is damaged, and he starts to. I don't know if he's freezing or it's like he's popping. Like I don't know. It's weird, but it doesn't last, and he starts healing. So then this is where Shikishima intercedes. They recognize he's got a death wish, or they think he does at least, and he flies
Very dramatic. It looks like they
very
slowed
much.
the scene down to
Yeah, and
make you think that.
Godzilla charges up again, and right before he lets loose his breath, he flies the plane into his mouth, and it explodes, and Godzilla's head comes off, basically.
Yeah, that was a great visual. I like that. Much as I hate seeing Godzilla die, but that was one of the more satisfying ways to kill him off.
Yes, and then and I didn't pick up on this the first time, but I did the second time. Godzilla's body starts falling apart, and I think it's pretty clear is because you have all of that accumulated energy in him, and his system's getting overloaded. Like, where's it going to go?
Yeah,
So then he falls apart because he doesn't have his head to release it with,
right.
and then which goes back to the plot hole earlier when he was fully charged up and he dropped down to the bottom. Why didn't that happen then?
It's a fair question. Again, where does the energy go? Now hold on. Now we just saw the Megaguirus, and he got canceled again, and that didn't do him any harm. So I think we can at least give it a pass that Godzilla has a cancel if he needs to, like in any good fighting game.
Probably. But I think it would have honestly. I think it would have been a really cool scene if when he dropped down, if he had just shot straight up and it hadn't hit anything.
Yeah,
But
yeah, that's fair.
anyways, I think missed opportunity, potential plot hole, not a big one though. So then they're really sad, but they see that Shikishima's alive and he had ejected out.
Let's see the parachute.
Yep. So they get back
Now,
to the
okay,
shore.
let me ask you
Go
a
ahead.
question here. Who do you think all the crewmen are saluting? Are they saluting the? Because they do it right as Godzilla is falling apart, and they
I think
they
it is.
don't really
I
show.
think it's. I think it comes across as a sign of respect to their foe, but I'm not
Okay,
100% sure.
because
It could probably go either way, but they're looking
it
at
would seem.
Godzilla.
Yeah, if they were saluting Shikishima, you'd say what they need to do is get that tugboat out there in a hurry to get him out of the water. That would be the better saying than saluting him as he floats to the sea.
Yeah. So they get back to land, and he receives words that his girl is alive. That's a miracle.
So that was, just so we know, Sumiko, they had a scene earlier that I'm not sure what they wanted the audience to think, but she gets a letter
Oh,
after
I knew what to think. I knew what to
Shikishima.
think. I've
It's
seen
like,
enough
oh,
movies.
yeah, but I don't know. But they had that in there. I don't know if that spoils the surprise or what, but that was in there, and she's waiting with Akiko. And yeah, they all go to the hospital together.
Yes. And what do they find?
They find Noriko with a head bandage.
Yes. So she survived. And so she asks him if his war is over. He cries and says yes. We're implied that they're, going to get married and be the family. And then they end the movie. That scene ends with the camera pans to the other side of the room, and there's some kind of weird veiny pattern on her neck.
Oh
It
yeah,
seems to be growing,
G cells. Who knows?
which I think was completely unnecessary. I did not like that.
They could have saved that if they wanted to. It's never a guarantee that any Godzilla movie ever gets a direct sequel. In fact, more often than not, they never do. And as
Well, I just
interesting
think
as that is, I think it would have been better to save that if and when they ever greenlit a sequel. To kind of redo the scene, but show that as the opening.
yeah. So I mean, depending on what they're wanting to do with that, I still don't like it. The idea, like, I don't think this continuity of Godzilla, like, I don't see room in this for like, what were they going to do with her? Where are they going to go with this?
You could have a Biolante situation. The actress was on record as doing an interview in a magazine, and she said, if there is a sequel, I might be the one stepping on people. But who knows how that's
But
going to
like,
play out.
but that, like, I don't know. This is not the movie that presents that kind of sequel up. That's all I'm saying. This is like a
Yeah,
serious war movie.
yeah,
It's like
it's
it's like
not.
when they went from 1954 Godzilla, they immediately started changing the tone of the series in order to accommodate having pro wrestling matches with the monsters. Like,
Now, I
I think
think
the
it's
whole tone of
possible.
this.
Now, I'm
Go
going to
ahead.
throw this out there that regardless of what the long term effects of this, we'll call it Noriko's condition, internally, that could be the justification for why she survived the encounter in Ginza. Because somehow she absorbed enough G cells, or whatever you call it, to give her an enhanced regenerative ability. Now, is it out of, again, it's way more sci fi than this movie probably wanted to get into, but, well, there it is, to quote Ian Malcolm.
Well, I don't know.
There it
I
is.
I think if you're going to present a movie like this, you get one crazy thing that can't exist that you can throw in the movie, which you can
Yeah,
center the plot around, which is Godzilla in this movie.
all right.
It's like, this isn't. I don't know. I didn't like it.
Well, I'm sure it splits on the populace, and I guess they want to get. It might increase the replay value to some people. They feel like they missed something earlier. They want to go back and see it to see if there was any other hints in the movie, and I'm not sure there were. Even though she's in, we'll say
That
this:
was that.
Noriko is in the closest proximity to Godzilla and lives of any other character except Shikishima, who ejected because of the airplane and everything else. So I don't know, but
She
I don't
wasn't that close
understand
to him.
any other payoff.
She wasn't that close to him. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Like, there's no other outlandish. And honestly, even it's not even Godzilla that's the outlandish element. It is the idea that there is a dinosaur-like creature that could be mutated. Like,
Yeah,
I
sure.
mean, I don't know.
Whatever.
There's just no fantasy element in this movie, so it's completely out. It's just weird. All right. Anyways,
Let me interject one thing. I would love, since we just saw Megaguirus and they recreated the scenes of Godzilla's history in the 50s, and then they went to, I guess, 1966. I would love to see a Godzilla sequel in this style, direct with minus one or not, that takes place in the late 50s or early to mid 60s, which plays into the Cold War hysteria and paranoia.
No, I'm on board. I think that Godzilla that in this series they should give him the full X-Men treatment.
Ooh, boy. Look at
Like
that. All the way
I
up
want a
to the
'60s
90s, huh?
movies. I want a '70s movie. I want an '80s movie. That's what I
Let's
want.
do it. Oh, yeah. Let's do it unofficially if we have to. Move to Japan and make our own Blood and Honey Godzilla Through the Decades
So
series.
I will say I don't know. I don't know what that looks like in terms of Japan. So they may need to take him overseas somewhere because I'm not sure
Mhm.
Japan had. I mean, this is just I don't know. I don't know if they had anything interesting going on in the '70s or '80s. But play off the drama,
All
play off the
right.
American box office, ship him overseas. I don't know.
What
It
country?
depends. If you can, yeah, whatever you want to do. Godzilla versus
Okay.
the Beatles. I don't know.
Oh, we need a return to the British monster movie tradition. We do need a return to that.
All right.
The
So
Hammer
then,
era, Hammer film, Hammer horror era. Yeah.
so just to wrap this up, in terms of the movie, the post-credit scene, you get a piece of Godzilla's flesh begins to regenerate in the
Do
bay.
you think it was his heart or just a random piece of flesh?
I don't know because I was thinking about that too. Like if one random piece of flesh starts regenerating, then all those pieces should start regenerating, and you should
It
have like
looks
a
like it
bay
had a
full of
heartbeat,
Godzillas.
which was a
Yeah, so
fun
I
thing.
think it was the heart, which again, I guess it would be kind of like in those anime movies. You have to find the piece of Godzilla which was responsible for the regeneration. It's got to be whatever that part is. So
Yeah, perfect cell. There you go. Very
yeah,
Dragon Ball Z.
yeah, and that's the only way you don't have a bunch of different Godzillas growing at the same
Yep.
time.
Which a
But
Shin Godzilla sequel might have been, but that's a story for another day.
yeah, yeah. But anyways, this was I think again we're watching a lot of them, but based off of recent experience, I would put this movie at my as my third favorite Godzilla film.
I'd
I
put it
would put it
number
behind.
one, but you go ahead.
Well, so I consider the 1954 Japan and the 1954 U.S. versions as completely different movies. So
Okay.
those are my one. That's my one and my two, and I would put this at number three right now because, like I said, I really do like the serious Godzilla movies, and I'd put Shin Godzilla as number four. But I'm negotiable if whether or not he would stay at four once I see some more stuff.
Yeah, it's difficult for me, even though I think this is the best. It is the best because it takes so much from the original that works so well. And
Yes.
just like in a video game where you have a remastered version, where you do remix of familiar levels, you have to give credit to the original for giving all that imagery that worked the first time. And you finally got to give respect to somebody who can remix it successfully, do some different scenes. I think whenever we do get around to the original Godzilla, the most iconic character in that one, probably both the American and the Japanese, is our mad scientist, Dr. Serizawa, who is missing an eye, just like Noriko is. Not that she's necessarily missing an eye in the end of this movie, but one of her eyes is covered, just like Serizawa wears a patch. And Serizawa gives up at life, and he chooses not to eject when he could have. But here you see Shikishima trying to live. So that's the contrast in these two. This one is a more upbeat, hopeful movie, whereas it seems like Dr. Serizawa still believes in the Japanese cult of honor and death and Bushido.
Yeah. So on note with that, I'd forgotten I read it. So I wrote down a quote from an article, like a review, and it was talking about the movie being about forgiveness and preserving the future. And I'll just read this paragraph. Using children and family as a symbol for a fruitful future, the new leaders of the defense team are eager to preserve human life, optimistically learning from their brutal history while hoping for a better tomorrow. Even when compared to the original Godzilla, where Dr. Serizawa sacrifices himself to take down the mighty monster, Minus One manages to keep Shikishima alive while successfully bringing him down. So, like, even the dichotomy of that critique of that kamikaze culture, you don't have in the 1954 film.
True.
You know, society and culture hadn't matured in that way yet. of 60 years of reflection, of course. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, like I said, this is after watching the last couple of films, this was a needed break.
Well, yeah, fair enough. But there's some gems in that Millennium series. I think we'll find a few in there.
So what's
But
the next one we're gonna watch? The title of
I
it?
was thinking we'd do Giant Monsters All Out Attack, since that is the next chronologically in that series. But we'll see.
And what is that plot? It is in one sentence.
Godzilla is reanimated in part due to the souls of the deceased kamikaze pilots.
Yes. I hope I really enjoy this movie. I have not watched it yet, but I'm very scared that it's going to be very underwhelming. And I think,
Well, I thought we
regardless of
watched
whether
it together 20 years ago or something like that. But
okay, we probably did, but that's how long. That's been too long. But
well. Something I want to note is something I don't have as much understanding as I would like to, but the director of this movie, Takashi Yamazaki, whatever, but about 10 years ago or more, he did a film for Toho that was basically a drama that was a celebration of Toho's anniversary, and it went well beyond their properties of Godzilla. But it was notable because this particular scene from the movie became viral, and it was a scene that was seemingly set in the 1940s or 50s of just somewhere in Japan, and a fully CGI Godzilla was rampaging, and he was way more, we'll call him expressive and emotive than anything you'd see in this movie, like you'd expect of a lot of that CGI of that era. But it looked good enough that people said, I want a real Godzilla movie like that. And then the director finally got his shot with this movie to do it. And I think he topped his Godzilla scene in every way.
I have not seen that movie. Or that scene. I'll have to go back and look for that.
And unfortunately, I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but it's not the sort of thing you can just pull up on any streaming services I know of. Like to buy it or stream it. And I always wanted to see that because the Godzilla scene really is just a tiny little fantasy moment. But it's interesting the longevity that moment had that finally culminated in this film last year.
No, that's definitely an interesting connection. Maybe they can make a Netflix movie based off that.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to add, Adam?
It's all downhill from here with Godzilla movies.
They got the original. There's some good ones out there. This was not just a good Godzilla movie. This was a good film. So you don't get that very often in this genre.
I think when we finish the Millennium series, we should just do Shin, and then we can start over and go all the way back. Or I don't know. Yeah. You got to structure them. Maybe we should do Shin Godzilla right around the time we do Godzilla's Revenge, in between that one and Son of Godzilla. Just try to break that up.
We need a break.
Bit. Yeah,
I'm hoping. I haven't seen the kid movie with the dream sequences. I haven't seen that movie since I was probably 15 years old or something. Maybe even 10.
It ain't gotten any better, but I've never seen it in straight up Japanese either. I've only seen the English dub.
Okay, well, I was hoping that it would be better as an adult watching it, but you're not giving me a lot of confidence.
No,
a lot of hope. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening to us. We'll be back soon. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.